have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA on this historic week. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. First, apologies that I'm here at all. To Andy, mostly because I have a bad cold, but I couldn't miss this news week. But I might absent myself occasionally, but I'm sorry, Andy. I'll try to keep my distance.
It's good to have you here under any circumstances, but as if you haven't been living under a rock, you know that the United States Supreme Court declined to grant cert in 7 same-sex marriage cases on Monday, making gay marriage legal in 5 more states immediately, and with 6 more in the circuits, and they're same circuits as these places. So
we promise we will sort this all out for
Yes.
you in a clear, easily understandable way, because we've been getting questions for days now about what the heck is going on.
So hit the record button. You may have to listen to it again and take out your notebooks.
Yes. And to complicate things, the day after the Supreme Court's move, on Tuesday, the Ninth Circuit on the West Coast struck down same-sex marriage bans in Nevada and Idaho, but Supreme Court Justice Kennedy granted a stay of that decision.
In Missouri, the state will not appeal a circuit court judge's ruling ordering the recognition of same-sex marriages from out of state.
We told you this was going to be complicated. So let's get away from marriage for a second. A gay teenager in Virginia was fighting back against being brutally bullied, and he got arrested for assault.
He's in the hospital. He got arrested.
Yeah.
New York City is moving to make it easier to change your gender on your birth certificate.
In an attempt to catch up with New York State. And there may be some affordable housing for LGBT older people in the works in Suffolk County in New York.
A screening of the movie Milk about Harvey Milk was nixed at Catholic University by authorities.
Deliberate ignorance. NGLTF has changed its name again.
An Englishman who was sentenced to 4 months in a Moroccan prison for homosexuality was released after political pressure from his homeland.
And that crazy president of Uganda, he is now hedging on reinstituting a draconian anti-gay law that would go, of course, with the already severe penalties for homosexuality.
And I will review Blythe Danner in the Country House on Broadway, but we start with the United States Supreme Court, which did on Monday issued a not a ruling but a non-decision.
Well, I'm gonna start back a few months or years.
Oh, okay.
All right, here's where we need to start. The United States of America judicially is divided into a number of circuits. What, 13?
Yeah.
I know there's at least 11, plus the District of Columbia, and
right. Special courts.
Yeah, but about a dozen circuits and several states in each circuit. So what's happened is that as we file cases for same-sex marriage legalization state by state, we get decisions at the state level, and then the appeals go up through the process and land in the top circuit court, the Court of Appeals, in each circuit. And from there, they would go to the Supreme Court. So we've had decisions in 3 of those dozen circuits. In the 4th Circuit, which is Virginia, in the 7th Circuit, which is Indiana and Wisconsin and a couple of other states, and in the 10th Circuit, which is Utah and Oklahoma. Those are the decisions that rule, plus there are other states there.
And the 4th Circuit takes in some other states, too.
Yes. So as we got those decisions in those 3 circuits at the Court of Appeals, the highest level in those circuits, the losers at those cases, the states generally, or the right-wing people standing in for the attorneys general, appealed those cases to the Supreme Court. And as those appeals were filed, the Supreme Court issued stays, or sometimes the circuit courts themselves, saying, all right, we see all these decisions have been made, but they're all on hold. We're not going to legalize marriage in any of these states yet until the Supreme Court gets a chance to look at all this.
So the Supreme Court took 7 of these cases from three of the circuits and 5 states. And they met and talked about it on September 29th, and we weren't sure when they were going to announce anything. It could have been a long time.
Most people thought that the discussion, the question was, which case will they take or which cases? And there were a lot of debates, and we told you about how, particular lawyers were involved in particular cases.
Forget about all that. Forget about all that. That's in the past, because this Monday, the court said, we're not taking any of these cases. And when the Supreme Court says that they don't take a case, the lower court ruling stands. So in these 3 circuits, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th, that's the law now.
Well, first of all, they refused to take it. The decision stands. So there are 7 cases in particular from 5 states that they said we're not taking the appeal.
So the 5 states where same-sex marriage immediately became legal are Indiana, Oklahoma, Utah, Virginia, and Wisconsin. That got us to 24 states in the District of Columbia.
Yeah. Now, there was a little procedural thing that had to happen. The circuit courts had to mandate the implementation of their rulings, but people started getting married immediately in all those states. The first day on Monday, people were married in all 5 of those states. But then the brilliant thing is that each of those circuits does encompass other states, or 2 of them do. So
the states of Colorado, Kansas, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, and Wyoming are also supposed to do this because their circuits. Now that is the operative ruling in their circuits.
The controlling ruling, but they have to go through a little process.
Yes.
The Court of Appeals has to actually rule in each of those ancillary states on the marriage cases that have been brought there.
But in Colorado, the Attorney General Suthers there said all counties must issue licenses. So
they're jumping the gun.
South Carolina, the Attorney General said he was waiting for the court to tell him what to do, but they got some things started there as well.
Absolutely. A court there started issuing marriage licenses.
However, in Kansas, the Attorney General won't budge, and Governor Brownback is defending the ban, and the ACLU is seeking an immediate lift of the ban there. In Wyoming, Governor Meade will continue to defend the ban. The National Center for Lesbian Rights is bringing in 4 couples. They filed for the immediate right to marry.
Basically, our side is going into court in each of these ancillary states and saying, all right, so now you've seen the Supreme Court is not going to review these decisions. We've got these existing marriage cases, and we want an immediate decision that conforms to the circuit court ruling.
They're saying, we're here, it's clear, get used to it.
I'd shake your hand on that, but I don't want to take a bigger chance of making you sick. There are some interesting sidelights to this. First of all, there was no dissent from the Supreme Court on this rejection of appeals. And sometimes when the court does not take appeals, when they refuse to grant certiorari, someone will write a dissent from that, and there was no written dissent, and that's kind of curious.
And we can only speculate what's going on. Our friend Art Leonard, who's a gay legal eagle, has the sense that they're in the meeting, and Kennedy says, you take one of these cases, I'm going to make same-sex marriage for the whole country. So the conservatives, because you only need 4 justices to take a case, and that slows things down. So the 4 conservatives said, oh, okay, then we won't. And we'll just allow it to go into effect in the circuits, but that way we don't have to make a big decision for the whole country.
Well, I think there are several possible
That's one of them.
Scenarios here. Yes, one scenario is the conservatives don't want a 50-state decision now, so they figure if they lie low on this, since they can't count on Kennedy ruling with them, then they are only allowing some states, and they might still have a backup plan. And their backup plan may be that as this continues to play out, a couple of things could happen. First, one of the liberal justices could disappear. A Republican could get elected in 2016. There could be another conservative judge on the court. They could suddenly have a 5-judge conservative majority, and they could really go after this and either stop any future same-sex marriages or whatever.
Although these decisions are going to bring us to 30 or 35 states, basically, that are going to have it.
But the Supreme Court has not ruled for these marriages. They have simply let the circuit court ruling stand. So a subsequent court
That's true.
could take cases and say, you know what, the fact is same-sex marriage has no legal standing, and we're going to stop this.
Well,
we can't wipe out the marriages that have already taken place, but we could refuse to let any more happen.
Mike Huckabee, who used to be the governor of Arkansas, said if I were a governor, I would just say I'm not abiding by the Supreme Court on this. And that's what should have been done on Roe v. Wade. They should have just ignored the court and gone ahead and and done the right thing.
Are you promoting treason,
Yeah.
Governor Huckabee?
Yes,
well,
he is.
here's my other doomsday scenario. We have not had decisions yet. We're waiting for decisions in the 5th, 6th, 8th, and 11th circuits. Now, the 5th circuit is Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. I'm not optimistic about that, but who knows? The 6th is the Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Michigan case, which
Yes.
has been argued, and we're waiting for a decision any day. In fact, I got a phone call today from someone who claimed to have a little inside information that the 6th Circuit will rule in the next couple of weeks and will rule for us.
And you would certainly hope they're going to be influenced by what's going on right now this
Well,
week.
they'd have to be, because the thinking after the oral arguments was that it was going to go 2-1 against us.
Right.
I never entirely believed that, but it's dicey in the 6th Circuit. The 8th Circuit is places like North Dakota and South Dakota and Nebraska. The 11th Circuit is Florida and Georgia and Alabama, I think. So any of those circuits could go against us. So here's my question. Let's say one or more of those circuits decide against same-sex marriage. Will the Supreme Court, do the same thing they just did with these previous rulings and say, we're not going to review it. We are going to say that each region or each state has the right to make their own decisions, be it by judicial fiat, and we're not looking for a 50-state solution.
That is possible, because that's what always troubled me about Justice Kennedy's decision in the Windsor case, because he said this has always been a states' rights issue. Marriage is defined by the states. It's right there.
Right.
He had the opportunity right there to do this with all his beautiful flowing arguments about the children of gays and protecting them and all this kind of stuff, and he didn't. So, the only thing that's changed since then is that so many states have been covered by it.
Sure.
And you're getting to the point where, somebody can't move. We'll have to go to certain parts of this country and not be married anymore.
Well, that's already been true,
Yes.
and it's just less true now. So the justices could decide, well, it's not such a big deal, so you can't get married in Alabama. You can get married everywhere else. I'm not predicting this. I'm simply pointing out the possibility.
And it's not over till it's over.
Exactly.
On the other hand, in Missouri, where we got that nice circuit court ruling, a state court ruling overturning the ban on same-sex marriage, the Attorney General said he won't appeal that. Now, this is for out-of-state marriages being
recognition
recognized.
of out-of-state marriages. The other thing we didn't discuss just now is why didn't the liberal justices, the 4 of them, vote to take the cases from the circuit court and in fact do a 50-state ruling? And the thinking there goes back to what Ginsburg said about Roe v. Wade, which was too much too fast.
I like the fact that the New York Times in their editorial took her on about that, and her saying there's no rush on this. There is a rush. because when you're denied rights, and a lot of these people in these states are denied their rights, come on, if you get with the program here.
Well, speaking of rights brings up yet another angle, which is that in many of these states where marriage is now legal for same-sex couples, there is no non-discrimination law.
Makes for a very interesting scenario, because if you step out and assert your rights by getting married, everybody's probably gonna know you're gay, and then you can experience anti-gay discrimination.
We have seen this play out already in Pennsylvania, which was, until now, the one state that had same-sex marriage legal, but not a non-discrimination law. And in fact, we had a wedding venue refuse a wedding, and there was no recourse because there's no non-discrimination law that includes sexual orientation or gender identity.
So, we report all the time about Catholic churches that, get rid of employees when they get married to a same-sex partner.
Or Catholic schools.
But this could be a private employer, a regular private employer, or a public employer who could do this.
It could be rejection of public accommodations. It could be rejection of housing.
Winning
the
right to marry is not the whole.
What winning the right to marry does, it certainly gives you a number of rights, including all federal rights.
Within your relationship, yes.
But mostly what it does is set a standard of legitimization of same-sex couples and gay people. And we must continue this fight and extend this right to full non-discrimination laws across the country. And that is the next battle. And that is where we're going. So keep that in mind. Let me just say, Ted Olson, the Republican hotshot lawyer who had hoped to get to the Supreme Court with this in the Virginia case, said the Supreme Court rejection of these appeals was the highlight of my life.
Well.
Ted Cruz, on the other hand.
Thank goodness it wasn't getting George Bush elected president at the Supreme Court.
Ted Cruz, senator from Texas, on the other hand, blew the top of his head off.
It exploded.
He's so upset. Oh my God.
He wants to pass some kind of a federal amendment that would stop this. It's not going to happen, of course.
No, but the right wing is not giving up. And what they will do is they will try to chip away at this, as they have tried to chip away at reproductive rights.
As they have successfully chipped away at reproductive rights and abortion. I mean, we've had outrageous abortion decisions this week, Texas being allowed to, close all its clinics.
So what the right wing is going to do is continue this theme of religious discrimination. And, you can't force us to bake wedding cakes or hold wedding ceremonies or whatever. So watch out for that.
Yes, I'm not holding my breath for the Holy Father to come through on this at the family conference they're having right now.
More on that
in Rome.
in a moment.
Yeah. Now, there was this Pew poll, P-E-W poll, that came out this week that showed same-sex marriage dropping from 54% in February to 49% in September, which is really probably within the margin of error. But an amalgam of 33 polls found support at 53% and opposition at 38%. So the Pew poll is an outlier.
It is, but and we have made geometric gains in the polls over a very short period of time. But it's not at 80%, and this may also be playing into why the liberals on the court did not take these cases.
When the Supreme Court overturned the laws banning interracial marriage in this country, support for the opposition to interracial marriage was at about 74%.
Yes.
Even in states like New York, et cetera. People were against it. I think probably there were, so we're way ahead on that.
Yeah. So that was Monday with the Supreme Court, and then on Tuesday, one of the circuits that had not yet ruled, and that was the Ninth Circuit.
Even though the Ninth Circuit had ruled in the California case, they had to rule in the Idaho and Nevada case. Nevada. Let's call the whole thing off Nevada.
The Ninth Circuit also, we'll get to the other states. So they ruled unanimously, 3-0, that same-sex marriage bans were illegal in Nevada and Idaho. And Nevada was interesting because that was one of the few states where the judge had ruled against us. So they overturned that ruling. ruling. And they also issued an immediate mandate to put this into effect.
Yes.
God knows why, because that just triggered Idaho turning to the Supreme Court and saying, oh, hold it, we have to be given some time to decide whether to appeal.
So you got until Thursday at 5 o'clock to get your arguments in. That's what Justice Kennedy said.
Yeah,
That's his circuit.
He did stay the decision, and they do have the right to appeal. And just because the Supreme Court has rejected the appeals from these other cases in other states doesn't mean they couldn't decide to take a particular case from another circuit.
There was a clerk in Clark County who said that they would accept. You know, I knew somebody who lived in Washington, and they said Washington. And I thought, so people pronounce things differently.
I think the official pronunciation of Nevada is Nevada.
The official pronunciation. Like it ain't New York, it's New York.
But here are the other states in the Ninth Circuit that should very shortly be the beneficiaries of same-sex marriage. In addition to Idaho and Nevada, Alaska, same-sex marriage will soon be legal in Alaska, in Arizona, in Montana, and in Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, which are part of the Ninth Circuit.
Despite her cold, all those pronunciations are correct. And you can...
If they can even hear me at this point. Yeah. Strangely enough, though, Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are an anomaly because,
they're with us,
well,
aren't they?
One is with the first and one is with the third, but there are no cases there because all those states legalize same-sex marriage. So they're the only entities within the circuits that haven't.
We need a case.
Well, there is a case
there,
in Puerto Rico, but they need to go through the process.
We're getting there, folks.
Yeah.
We should be very happy this week, shouldn't we?
Yes, and we're happy for the Arizona couple who went to Coronado, California to get married, got yelled at when they had an outdoor wedding by a gay basher, because the citizens and businesses of Coronado are giving them a do-over wedding on National Coming Out Day
All
this
expenses
Saturday.
paid.
October 11th, so that's nice. And, you know, if they waited a little longer, it'd be legal in Arizona.
Yeah.
And in Florida...
They can do it again.
A sad story, but a good outcome. Arlene Goldberg was married to Carol Goldwasser. I think they got married in New York a few years ago. But they'd moved to Florida, and Carol died, and Arlene wanted to be acknowledged on the death certificate as the surviving spouse, and a judge ruled in her favor a few weeks ago, and this week she got the death certificate laying that out.
All right. On to gay news?
Yes, I'm done with marriage news.
Let's stay in Arizona for a second and get the videotape ready, because there was a lesbian couple there who ran an ad for Terry Goddard for Secretary of State, slamming Terry's opponent, Michelle Reagan, for voting for an anti-gay bill. So this is an unusual political ad. Let's take a look at it.
State Senator Michelle Reagan voted to legalize discrimination against my family with Senate Bill 1062.
Thankfully, Arizonans rallied and the bill failed.
But State Senator Reagan voted for that hateful legislation and stood with those who would make us second-class citizens, even at the risk of losing the Super Bowl. With that record, how can we trust her to be fair as Secretary of State? As Attorney General, Terry Goddard was tough, but treated everyone equally.
And that's why we are voting for Terry Goddard.
Lesbians for the Super Bowl. Terrific. That's a breakthrough. You don't see these ads. You don't see them in New York.
Unbelievable that this is where we've come in this day and age.
And yet Arizona doesn't have civil rights protections for gay people. They just the governor there, Brewer, vetoed the anti-gay bill.
No, but what this is about is the proposed law that was going to put a broad religious discrimination.
Yes, the anti-gay bill that Governor Brewer vetoed.
Yes.
Yes.
And
which passed overwhelmingly.
The candidate there against voted for it.
Okay.
All right.
In McKinney, Texas, we got a picture of her. Out lesbian April Schwartz Larson was chosen homecoming queen. She said that moment still doesn't seem real to me. She's pictured here with her king, who's Preston Smith. April's friend Emily nominated her as a joke, but then thought it would be super cool if a lesbian won. She deserves it, and she's an awesome human being. She wants to win real bad. The principal said the school is respectful and welcoming, and April's parents have never been prouder of her. Because I hope it's not because she's standing there with a man. I'm sure it's not. It's because she's a proud lesbian.
What does Governor Perry have to say about that?
Yeah.
However, at Catholic University in Washington, D.C., they were going to hold a screening of the movie Milk. Do they have a gay group on campus that was going to do that?
Yeah. They do have a gay group.
But the university said, well, that is contrary to Catholic teaching, and we are vetoing the showing of that film.
Just terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. This is I'll go to this one. This is a really sad story from Henrico, am I saying that right, in Virginia?
Yes.
A gay teen, 14 years old, Eric Martin. We have a picture of him in distress in the hospital at Highland Springs High School, was bullied and beaten by 4 classmates and hospitalized in serious condition.
Yeah.
After 9 days in the hospital, he was charged by the police with assault for allegedly throwing the first punch. His mom says the school won't talk to her, says that he fought back against relentless bullying. He has a possible broken arm concussion and is on a suicide watch. And, you know, he's trying to defend himself here from taunts and people coming after him, and you arrest him for assault.
Terrible. Terrible. Well, there's another story of an assault here right in the middle of New York City in a very gay area, what we call Hell's Kitchen in Manhattan.
Right near the theater district.
Exactly, in the West 40s. A gay man out, I think this was like 7 o'clock in the morning.
4 a.m.
Oh, I take it back. 4 a.m. That's a different issue. But he's walking along the street. There's a group across the street, and a guy comes across the street to attack him. Here is a local news report on that.
Now on to that frightening attack in Manhattan that police believe may be a hate crime. A man punched in the back of his head by a stranger who said anti-gay slurs. Eyewitness News reporter Jim Dolan is live now in Hell's Kitchen. Jim?
Yeah, Lori, this is a 21-year-old guy walking down the street with a friend early in the morning on Sunday, September 14th. We are just now getting word of what happened, and police are hoping someone is going to recognize the man in the video we're going to show you in just a couple of minutes. But the man was walking down the street. A man walked up from the other side of the street. He was walking with 4 friends, and out of nowhere started yelling anti-gay slurs and punched that man, the 21-year-old, in the back of the head so hard he went down, unconscious. Now in the video, you see a white or Hispanic male about 25 years old, 5 feet 10 inches tall, 180 pounds. Police believe he is the man responsible for this attack. It's especially troubling in a neighborhood that prides itself on diversity.
I've been here like 4 or 5 years now, and especially like walking around here, even late at night, they grab a drink at a corner store at like 2 in the morning. Like I never feel in danger.
Pretty diverse, right? Pretty welcoming to people.
Oh yeah, this is definitely like a big, like gay accepted area. Like I never thought like something like that would happen around this area.
Well, very few people did. It surprised almost everybody here in this neighborhood. Again, police are hoping someone will recognize that man that you saw in the video and tell them who he is so they can get him in jail before this happens again. Reporting live from Hell's Kitchen, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Call the police. I have often walked down that street before. There are a lot of gay bars in that neighborhood, and of course, just when I'm walking home from the theater, I often go down blocks like that.
Right, but not at 4 o'clock in the morning. I
1
don't
o'clock?
think.
1 o'clock?
Yeah, okay. And you remember the attack on the gay men in Philadelphia a couple of weeks ago? Well, the legislature in Pennsylvania is now advancing a hate crimes bill. Policing might be a better idea, or education in the schools.
Although there's over-policing in New York City at the
Yes.
Port Authority bus terminal. Police have arrested 60 men this year for public lewdness in restrooms, 7 times the number last year. They're accused of masturbation. 12 of them have gotten together and say they were just urinating at a toilet where there are barriers around them, so nobody could see anything. You know, if anything was, you know, I mean.
Well, the cops stepped back stepped back to look at these guys and smirked and said, you know, I know what you're doing.
What's clearly happening, and it's been happening for decades in this town, when they decide on stings like this, is these cops go in, they hate gay people, and I'm just saying it, and they pick out stereotypical gay people, and who's going to believe them when they go to court? You know, this was a gay person, they were probably having sex in the restroom. That's not what's happening, and it's an outrage. It's an absolute outrage, and I'm glad Legal Aid is taking it on.
And it never stops. You know, Robert Pinter went through years of fighting his false arrest in an adult bookstore.
Well, they accused him of being a prostitute, which a 50-year-old prostitute who was solicited by a young man. It was all a phony thing under Bloomberg.
So they went through all of that.
Now this is under de Blasio.
There's supposed to be training. There's supposed to be, you know, getting away from this stuff, and they just keep doing it and doing it and doing it.
We've got to put a stop to it.
Oh, I hope so.
Well, did you mention the hate crimes in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
Yes, you did. And then Louisiana State University is now going to allow students to minor in LGBTQ studies.
Okay. We told you briefly about this story of this Russian boy who was part of an exchange student program, was in Michigan, but didn't go back to Russia when he was supposed to. And Russia accused the U.S. of putting him with a gay couple who influenced him or seduced him, and they canceled the foreign exchange program. Well, now it turns out that this boy, who's 17 years old, is seeking asylum in the U.S. as a gay young man who faces potential persecution in Russia. He has been placed with two men who are acting as his gay foster dads. There's nothing nefarious here, except that Russia is upset at being exposed for being anti-gay.
They were sending hundreds of students here who are now going to be disappointed if they wanted to come to the United States, because they've canceled this Future Leaders Exchange program.
Right.
And Russia has been using it as a propaganda thing and been distorting what went on.
All right. I want to hopscotch a few things here. The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, which started life as the National Gay Task Force, is now the National LGBTQ Task Force.
Okay.
In an attempt to update themselves and be more inclusive.
In Suffolk County, Long Island, we're going to have the first LGBT senior housing in the tri-state area. It's the 4th in the country. We have a picture there of the press conference with
local politicians.
This is local politician is the county executive Steve Ballone, who's a Democrat, and David Kilmnick, who has been out there expanding social services. He's there to the left of the podium for 21 years. He started out running a youth agency. Now he's doing seniors, and they're going to have a big senior center. 50 units, apartments.
Now, it's important to say this is LGBT-friendly housing, because you cannot discriminate and allow, on the basis of sexual orientation in either direction.
It will have an LGBT senior center there as well.
In Bayshore.
Yeah.
We went to a press conference at the Stonewall Inn this summer with the National Park Service talking about doing some investigation of honoring more LGBT history sites in the area. Well, they have now given $50,000 to something called the LGBT Sites in New York City project and $25,000 to the LGBT Heritage of Kentucky project to identify historic sites.
And also in New York City, Councilmember Corey Johnson and Mayor de Blasio are proposing to redefine gender in terms of identity, not anatomy.
Well, not surgery.
For your birth certificate.
It's still common in many places that for someone to change their gender marker on their birth certificate, they must have proof of having undergone gender reassignment surgery. But that's considered an outdated requirement. New York State earlier this year dropped that requirement and went to a self-definition policy. But since New York City issues its own birth certificates, they had to do it separately, and they are now in the process of doing that. It does require a medical professional to certify your change of gender. As opposed to complete self-definition.
Speaking of transgender, Facebook never mind, is not insisting on real names now.
We never required your legal name. We just want you to use the authentic name you use in real life.
In Porterville, California, the city council has refused to sponsor a proclamation that would recognize the LGBT community on National Coming Out Day, October 11th. So the group Gay Porterville protested in the park there, before the hearing at the next council meeting.
Just to prove that not all gay people are perfect. The gay ex-treasurer of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, John Campbell, has been charged with stealing about $10,000 from various nonprofit agencies that he was involved with. He wrote checks for his personal use when he was not supposed to do that.
Hillsborough County in Florida, okay? They voted 7-0 to add sexual orientation and gender identity to their human rights ordinance. In 1995, they had it. They had one, and then they stripped it out of the law. So now it's back.
In Bedford County, Pennsylvania, the district attorney, Bill Higgins, has gotten that 14-year-old boy who was humping the Jesus statue.
Yes.
Sentenced to probation, 6 months off social media, a 10 p.m. curfew, and 350 hours of community service. The statue owners did not want him prosecuted.
Also, who's complaining?
But the DA went ahead and prosecuted him and got all these things imposed.
Well,
14 years old.
A better story. I heard from a mom in Ohio this week who was a proud mother of a 6-year-old transgender girl. And she says her school principal is a dream, and he's letting GLSEN come to do staff training for the whole school, and her girl is having no problems using the girls' restroom and all that kind of stuff, and that's all very encouraging to hear. In southern Ohio.
Yeah, that's great. And in New Jersey, we're mourning the death of Lily Macbeth, 80 years old,
Yes.
a transgender woman who was a teacher, a substitute teacher, I guess, in the Tuckerton, New Jersey schools. She fought for her teaching job after she had surgery in 2005. Parents in the school district took out a full-page ad against her, but the students and fellow teachers were all in her favor. She ended up, she did get her job back, but the school district didn't hire her very often. She was part of a Sports Illustrated centerfold of bold Americans in her previous gender identity because she was an extreme athlete.
Oh, okay.
So she had a number of credits to
you know,
her name.
an encouraging story. It's not particularly gay related, but it's related to the elections coming up from Ferguson, Missouri. Since the killing of Michael Brown by the police there, more than 3,000 people have registered to vote in a city of 21,000. So it's very encouraging.
Yeah,
like
because about 6% were voting before now.
And it was an all-white city council in a mostly black town.
Yeah, and that's why.
Warren Buffett was asked on CNBC why his Berkshire Hathaway gets a 0 from HRC. He said, "We don't fill out surveys. I'm 100% for full rights and every respect for gays and lesbians, but we don't fill out surveys."
And I don't control the policies of all the companies that I control. And speaking of HRC, they're doing one very bold thing. They're running a 7-city prayers tour before the Vatican Synod on the Family, which is taking place over the next couple of weeks.
Don't know how I feel about praying the rosary.
Listen, discern,
with
raising the
HRC.
voices of LGBT Catholics.
Don't know how I feel about that.
I think it's very dicey. But they have also put together this Hall of Shame. Their first Hall of Shame, naming the 19 anti-gayest members of Congress. They are basing this on their public statements, and they're voting to enshrine discrimination. But to my way of thinking, voting for ENDA with its huge religious exemption is voting to enshrine discrimination. And I do not believe all those people who voted for ENDA are going to end up in their Hall of Shame.
Absolutely.
So check that.
Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court Justice, criticizes the court for taking the position that not only must the state be neutral between religions, but it must be neutral between religion and non-religion. That is just a lie, he said. He's very emphatic.
Well, maybe he should talk to the American Unity Conference, which took place last week. Republican donors who are pro-LGBT. This is a room I wouldn't want to be in. Paul Singer, Dan Loeb, Ken Mellman, Ted Olson. Right.
You know, I wish that these people had better politics on other things.
Yeah, I'm going to go blow
All right,
my
you go
nose
blow
for
your
a
nose.
second. I'll be right back.
Can I move into some international news?
You can.
Well, I'll tell some stories that you might not have. Where are we? Hello. In England, Her Majesty's security detail is concerned about the staff use of Grindr and Tinder to bring casual hookups into the palaces. Not Buckingham Palace itself, but at St. James Palace and the Royal Mews, staff are allowed to sign guests in for overnights, and they think some of them are coming in as casual hookups. In Taipei, Taiwan, we have a picture of this. Of a big rally there. They are having a committee hearing on marriage equality in mid-October. Thousands marched outside the legislature. The pride parades there in Taipei are set for October the 25th. In Morocco, in Marrakesh, Ray Cole, who's 70 years old, of Kent, England, was sentenced to 4 months in prison for homosexuality. He had been detained with his Moroccan partner. So a conservative MP from Dover said that he was urging Brits to stay away from Morocco. You face serious charges for medieval crimes. He didn't mention that it was a crime in England for a long time, too, and not just in medieval times. There was a big social media campaign to get him out, but he was released and freed to go home on October 7th because of this pressure.
Well,
right.
I'm back.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, welcome back, Ann.
Hi. He may not want to go to France immediately because in Paris and Bordeaux, tens of thousands marched against LGBT rights.
Well, they were marching for traditional family values.
Yes, they were.
Including against assisted pregnancies and surrogacy.
Nightmare.
God didn't intend people to speak on the telephone either, you know.
Or fly in airplanes.
Just go back to yelling. No telephones.
I always wonder how
Or la telephone, as they say over there.
These strict constructionists who will only be, absolutist originalists deal with airplane transportation.
Well, you mentioned that whole Vatican thing. I had never heard of the World Congress of Homosexual Catholics Association, although I was a member of Dignity when I was a kid. But it is asking the Vatican for urgent change in its attitude towards LGBT people because there is this big conference going on in Rome about the family right now, which seems more focused on fudging things on divorced and remarried Catholics.
Oh, they're certainly not going to get to us in any positive way.
You never know how the Holy Spirit is going to act.
Hey, people didn't even know the Supreme Court was going to reject those appeals.
Well, everybody said it was a big surprise. We certainly talked about the possibility.
We certainly had and thought it was a real possibility.
Yes. Anyway, the group is not asking for much. They're asking for inclusion. How about asking the church to drop its hateful teachings and let have gay priests and women priests and gay weddings and all that stuff?
Well, here's someone who they can turn to for support. A famous boxer in Poland, Dariusz Miklaszewski, known as Tiger, says, I am an ally of LGBT people because I want to live in a country where my gay friends are not discriminated against.
In Quebec, they had planned a 5-year anti-homophobia ad campaign, and they did get it started in 2013, but it's been cut from the 2014-15 budget as part of a $3 billion in cuts. They're also putting a gender equality campaign on hold. The budget cuts.
And in Slovakia, our own Alliance Defending Freedom, the legal group that brings all these anti-gay cases here, is continuing to export hate, as we say. They have filed an amicus brief in a Slovakian court asking that the country be allowed to have a pro-family referendum vote.
But
mind your own business.
But keep your hate out of Catalonia. They have passed anti-homophobia legislation there with fines of up to 14,000 euros, which I think is about 20,000 bucks, for anti-LGBT attacks.
And in Chile, the Senate there is advancing a civil unions bill.
And in Quezon City, the Philippines, the city council unanimously banned discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity in employment, education, and public accommodations, and it includes affirmative action. They've had employment protections there since 2003. And this also includes insurance and access to goods and services, and includes educating employers and educators about LGBT rights. Let's get that going in New York.
Yeah. In Cameroon, cops raided a house and arrested 7 men they're accusing of being gay.
And then there's Uganda. President Museveni is having second thoughts about anti-gay legislation that was passed there but overturned on procedural grounds by the courts. The assumption was that Parliament would pass it again since it was unanimous the first time.
Yes.
Museveni says now it could hurt aid and trade. He says, we want to kill the snake, but we do not want to break the pot. That was his, he said. Now,
very colorful.
Under a 1950 law, Uganda can already impose a life sentence for homosexuality, though rights groups say no one has ever been convicted under that law. The controversy over the new one is even more draconian, but the problem is these discussions stir up so much anti-gay hatred.
Oh, they do, and vigilante
and backlash.
Stuff all over the country, and people get attacked and lynched and everything else. He talked about making a distinction between consenting sexual behavior and non-consensual behavior, because what they've always claimed was that these anti-gay laws were about those pedophile gays and gays also, who are seducing
but they also
kids.
said it was about protecting children from homosexuality, not just pedophilia.
That's what Putin says too. So now they're being a little, they're continuing to talk about making a distinction for consenting gays.
By the way,
but it's all about inflaming the populace.
Well, I mean, there was a pretty provocative op-ed piece in the Times this week about a woman saying we ought to treat pedophiles as just sick people who need treatment as long as they don't do anything and not, just look to lock everybody up. That was rather bold there in the middle of the op-ed page of the Times.
Yeah.
In Israel, the health ministry there warned against so-called conversion therapy, charged practitioners with misleading their patients, but an offshoot Orthodox LGBT group claimed that while the treatment had negative effects on some, others reported it worked. I mean, these are like the self-hating gays. It's called Kahoma. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Nevada. And they endorsed the marriage of gay men to lesbians.
Oh, that's so old hat. That's so yesterday. All right, AIDS news.
All right. The CDC has opened I didn't put this number up on the screen, but they're opening up a consultation hotline for HIV prevention pill, PrEP Truvada, pre-exposure prophylaxis. It's called the Clinician Pre-Exposure Prophylaxis Hotline, so it's for clinicians. I'll say the number here in case there are some clinicians out there, 855-448-7737. It's aimed at physicians, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants providing primary care to uninfected patients at high risk to help in the proper dispensing of PrEP.
And we talk a lot on this show and probably think about this almost exclusively for gay men, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. But in fact, this is an issue for women too.
Sure.
And GMHC is holding one of its periodic, what they call PrEP rallies, but they're really a panel discussion around the issues around PrEP. And this one is specifically for women. What does PrEP mean for women? And it's going to be Tuesday, next Tuesday, October 14th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Mount Sinai Roosevelt Hospital on 10th Avenue and 59th Street, Conference Room B. I didn't write any of that out either. But if you go to the gmhc.org website, I'm sure you can find this. Tuesday, 6 p.m., Roosevelt Hospital, 10th Avenue and 59th Street.
In Far Rockaway, New York.
There will be women who are on PrEP. There'll be doctors, there'll be activists, all on a panel discussing the issues around PrEP, particularly around pregnancy, too.
In Far Rockaway, New York, 2 men are suing because they were rejected. A lot of stories from New York this week. They were rejected by the Sandcastle 900-unit complex because their rent was going to be paid by the city's HIV/AIDS Services Administration. And they were told it's a private building. It wasn't really a sandcastle. They were told that it is a private building and they could rent to who they want to, and the lawyers say they're violating the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Absolutely.
Testers were sent to the Sandcastle apartment complex to confirm the discrimination, and they were also rejected. Do you make anything of these stories about early tracing AIDS back to Kinshasa? In the
we
Congo,
always knew the
and,
virus originated in Africa.
Well, they seem to be pinning these things down a little bit more, and it's all part of an effort to understand why it became a pandemic.
Because it fell into an area where there was a lot of trade and a lot of people moving all over, and a lot of transportation. Well, of course it takes a while.
Takes a while. Well,
I used to say when we would go out and do AIDS education to kids in schools, working for the Hedrick Martin Institute, I would say to kids who were very homophobic and AIDS phobic and everything, this was the late 80s, I'd say, you know, you're damn lucky that the virus landed in the gay male population, because otherwise you wouldn't have seen it for a long time.
Right.
You wouldn't have noticed it. It was only because otherwise healthy young men were getting sick in a definable way that we picked this up. It could have taken a lot longer to see it. You know, the New York City Department of Health early on, when they realized what was happening, went back and reclassified the deaths of about 10,000 intravenous drug users who had died on the streets, because they suddenly realized, oh, it's not just that they were junkies dying on the streets, they actually had HIV, but they hadn't noticed it.
Well, we need to learn all these lessons if we're going to get this Ebola thing under control as well.
That's
Although it's
a
very different, it's a very different kind of a virus. It kills quickly as opposed to HIV. All right, some entertainment news a little bit?
Okay.
All right. Well, I want to mourn the death of Marion Seldes, who died at the age of 86 this past week. She was a great stage actress who did about 18 movies as well, including playing an aging lesbian, partners with Vanessa Redgrave in If These Walls Could Talk.
Oh, yes,
2.
on TV.
Very moving portrayal. But I got to meet her, and you know, she was one of the most gracious people I ever met, and just a fabulous actress. She was a great interpreter of Edward Albee's work all her life.
Very famous for that. I want to alert you in New York to a couple of things coming up at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in the next couple of weeks. They're going to do a production of Angels in America in Dutch with English titles. October 23rd and 24th. And
Andy will not be reviewing it because it's directed by Ivo Van Hove, his least favorite director in the world.
Well, then instead you might want to go.
I know he's a darling of a lot of the critics.
Instead, you might want to.
You go, you decide.
You might want to go see The Source, which is an opera about Chelsea Manning as part of the Next Wave Festival.
Well, you're the opera critic for this show.
Yes, exactly. October 22nd through 25th, also at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. Tickets, $20.
All right. The Rainbow Room in New York, it's at the top of, what is it, the GE building? What is it called now?
Rockefeller Center, 30 Rock.
30 Rock.
Yeah.
Well, we had a picture there. For the first time, they're using rainbows. I think the stigma is gone. Maybe they did use them back in the 30s, but you know, it kind of, so they're using rainbows at the Rainbow Room.
Yeah.
And I saw The Country House on Broadway with Blythe Danner, the mother of Gwyneth Paltrow. It's Donald Margulies's homage to Chekhov. It's about a family of actors. It seemed very sitcom-y for the first half, but they're in Williamstown. It kind of snuck up on me, and I found it quite affecting at the end, which was nice. Daniel Sunyata, who was in Take Me Out, you know.
He was the gorgeous baseball player.
He played essentially a George Clooney character in this, and it was clearly. And
do we have any comment on George Clooney's marriage?
No.
To each his own?
Yeah, I mean, But there's also Eric Lang in this thing as the failed, bitter son of Blythe Danner, and David Rasche as a great stage director cashing in on making teen movies. So they're interesting characters, and once they got past some of the jokes in the first part, it got to be an interesting, serious drama. The Country House.
Yes. I watched on HBO the BBC documentary Hunted, the war against gays in Russia.
I have it on my DVR.
Well, they actually made it for the Sochi Winter Olympics, and it was a British production, and they replaced the female British narrator with Matt Bomer.
Yeah.
I was sort of conscious of that
An
throughout.
out gay actor.
Yeah, it's basically about this stuff we were talking about 6 months ago, which are these vigilantes in Russia who are luring guys and then beating them up and torturing them and putting it all on YouTube. And it's a reminder that that is going on, and I haven't heard that it's stopped. So
well, I mean, you know, we seemed all head up about Russia a couple of months ago when the Olympics were going on.
Don't
what
yell
happened
at me.
to us? About yelling, you did more than anybody.
Well, we got it in the news.
Yes.
I'll tell you what I think happened. I think the world became aware of how bad Putin was, and I think that has carried on.
And of course, people are concerned about Putin for other reasons now because of Crimea and Ukraine and all that stuff.
But I think we did put a negative cast on Putin in ways that a lot of people were not talking about previously, and that opened up a lot of this.
We even made him talk about homosexuality during his Olympic interviews.
He wasn't happy about that.
Nay. Oh, he was very defensive about it.
Yeah. So I found this film, you know, it's a little exploitative, I think, of the violence.
Yes.
I was a little uncomfortable watching it, thinking, you know, really, is this just sort of sensational, showing all this to exploit it, or are they really out for something serious here?
Right.
I was a little.
Well, what a week, Ann. Besides you getting sick, I mean, this is one of the most. No, this is one of the most historic weeks in our movement. I mean, I'm sure people all over the country. I mean, we're really sorry that we're not able to tell and show all the wonderful scenes of people being so happy to go into Virginia and Utah and all these other places to go in and get married.
Well, we thought about that. We thought about, you know, trotting out, as we have for years, pictures of happy couples getting married or engaged in these states across the nation.
But all happy couples are happy in the same way. And,
well, I think we really thought it was important to take the time to explain this to people, because I certainly, and I think you too, have fielded so many questions about what the heck happened and what is this all about and what does it mean, and
we're not entirely sure.
Well, there are certainly questions remaining.
But we are sure that for now, that, you know, people can get married in all these places, in all these new states.
I would sum it up this week by calling it a great leap forward. It is not the end of the story by any means. We have a long way to go. We have a lot of work to do. I love everybody who's done all the work that has brought us this far.
Now, somebody said in this they don't think any of these marriages can be taken away, but you did suggest here that if they finally do take a case and uphold the right of states to ban it, things could change.
Well, I think future marriages could be banned.
Yes.
But, and I'm not predicting that, just alerting you to the
Because we think we've reached a
possibility.
tipping point on this.
Stay alert.
Right.
Keep working.
Exactly.
And I'm going to go home and get well.
Take care.
See you next week.
Thanks for being here.
Bye.
Bye.